Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back. I'm your host, Angela Himsa, broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario. And you are watching Jess TV, streaming worldwide on Roku, Meta, and the NCG television network, and of course, jessfm.ca. Today, we have a very special guest. It's Darren Austin Hall, and he is a sound mystic, a Gnostic teacher, an ecstatic DJ, a philosopher, poet, author, and a soul alchemist. His work is a living invocation, from his crystal alchemy sound journeys to his visionary new book, Love's Revolution, and his new earth concepts from his album, Honor All Creation, and the Source Resonance Academy, where he trains others in the sacred power of sound healing. He's also a very outspoken truth speaker, which is why I invited him on this show. And he's someone who brings a rare blend of grounded intellect, cosmic insight, and fierce love for humanity into everything that he shares. So today we're going to be diving deep into sound as spiritual medicine, sacred rebellion, and the rise of transhumanism, the war on consciousness, and what it truly means to reclaim your power in the age of the new earth. So Darren, thank you so much for being here. It is an honor. Would you like to open us up with something, a tone, a breath, an om, whatever you want to bring us into resonance? Hello?
Any problems? Do you hear me?
I can now. You just went silent there for a second. I was like, okay, we're going for the silence.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I can totally lead us in a little centering. So, yeah, welcome everyone. And just closing down your eyes and just starting to tune into your life-giving breath and just taking a few deep breaths into your blessed body, breathing in through the nose. Just releasing a nice clearing sigh. And just starting to turn your awareness within yourself. And just start to notice your body in this space. And just starting to bring your mind into a relaxed state. And imagine that your mind is just broadcasting to every cell in your body the vibrations of peace. Broadcasting this from the brain and also from the heart space, which is the greatest vibrational station in the body. Taking your awareness now into the center of your chest and just imagining that your heart chakra is shining bright like a beautiful star of infinite loving light. And just imagine that that light is radiating into every atom, every quantum of your being. And just imagine that your whole body is starting to shine with this radiance of living love. Seeing your whole body shining and luminous. And breathing in the energy of love now with every breath into your heart. Just filling yourself with this warm feeling of affection, of self-honoring, self-sourcing. Feeling centered, feeling peaceful. You can glimmer open the eyes and join us in this sacred space.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Way to set the tone. All right. So let's just dive in. You've been a voice of truth and ancient wisdom for years now, and I've actually always really appreciated and respected what you share. During these chaotic times, what do you think it means to be spiritually grounded and also sovereign?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, when it comes to groundedness, I think for me, it's kind of obvious, but we need to spend a lot more time in nature. And you know, a big component of the work that I'm doing now is I'm slowly soft building this institute called Gaia Awakening and amassing a lot of my learnings around the ancient wisdom of the Gnostics and the
What was
goddess
it
of
called? I'm
earth.
sorry, I couldn't hear that just because he's in Greece right now on an island, and so the background noise is cicadas. Just for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, the cicadas. I'll try and speak a little louder. It is very hot here on the island of Corfu, so Mother Nature is singing her choir of summer sun. But yeah, this wisdom school I'm building, Gaia Awakening, is really about eco-spirituality. And this is the notion that, when we spend time in nature, we're actually connecting to an intelligence. We're connecting to the great mother, as the ancients would have called it. Mm-hmm. And nature in itself has so many healing properties that we've been disconnected from through, various realms of civility, like our evolution into industrial civilization and cities, leaving the environs of nature. And we've really done so at great deficit to ourselves, because when you're in nature, the smells, the pheromones of the trees, for example, they fight cancer. The sounds of water, the sounds of birds, the sunlight, all of these things are deep and potent medicine. And I would say, to tie it in with the idea of sovereignty, when you spend time in nature alone, in solitude, solitude is one of the great medicines of our spirituality, because especially nowadays when we have our smartphones and social media, we're very entangled with a lot of people, with a lot of communities online, and then of course our busy modern lives. And if we live in this crowded city, we don't have a lot of alone time. And we need that alone time, because when you're in the sacredness of solitude, you can hear the voice of spirit in your heart. Your heart is that oracle. So you can really couple this with just spending more time in nature. I mean, one of my Native American teachers would say, every single day, even if you live in the city, taking a consecrated walk to the park and spending time in the park. City. Especially, yeah, totally. If you live in the city, you've got to double up on these practices.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay, so how would you define the new earth? Because everybody's talking about new earth. Is it a place, a frequency, a prophecy, everything I just mentioned, or more?
Definitely everything. But I would emphasize the prophecy part, because there is this growing kind of very constructive criticism of what I might call New Age spirituality that's being bandied about right now. And I think that's useful, because some of these terms, now that spirituality is kind of vogue and cool, some of the terminology has become a bit superficial, and people aren't really aware that there are deeper meanings to some of these things, So the new earth, you can find lots of YouTube talks about fifth dimensional new earth ascension stuff. But what I like to also ground it in, because that stuff is very interesting, but there are prophecies that speak of this time where we are entering into a new evolution of our consciousness and civilization. So one of my great First Nations teachers, Dave Cushing Jr., who is Anishinaabe, he would talk about the new earth, and he would talk about their prophecy of the eighth fire, which be this lighting of a sacred fire, which would honor the awakening of what he called the rainbow people, which some of us may be people who hold the kind of
the rainbow warriors.
The rainbow warriors that's another prophecy. That's a beautiful thing. That's the Cree Native Americans. So you start to see, you can constellate all these different prophecies. And then one of the things I'm deeply connected to is the Gnostic wisdom schools, the mystery schools of the ancient world. And they perceived that the earth was this living goddess Gaia. And they said that she is awakening right now. She's going through a process of renewing herself, of evolving as well. We're kind of human-centric with a lot of our understandings and our spirituality. But the fact is, the awakening that humanity is going through right now could be precursed and pre-catalyzed by the awakening of the earth itself, we are symbiotically connected to.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay, so you've shared a lot of sound as medicine. I mean, this is what you dedicate a good portion of your work to. And you've done this internationally as well. What is the role of sacred sound in spiritual warfare and energetic sovereignty?
That's interesting, because this whole idea of spiritual warfare is also, very, it seems to be a more vogue topic these days. And it's interesting because I think for a lot of people, just on face value, it's how does spirituality and war conjoin, And this is where a very interesting prophecy as well that kind of connects to the new earth as well, and the rainbow warriors, is this Tibetan teaching of the Shambhala warriors. So this teaching is basically that during this time that we're living in right now, where they describe a kind of dark civilization that has taken over the earth, and they call it, their vernacular, they call it the barbarian civilization. And they say during this time, the Shambhala warriors will appear, and these will be human beings that have a deep sense of the unifying codes of all religion and spirituality. And they will have a kind of enlightenment to their consciousness, this ability to perceive through the matrix of the mind control that's on the planet. And they will wield two primary weapons. And this is why it's interesting to look at these prophecies, because people think of war being something about violence, about hurting people, about killing people. But the weapons that they wield, the first one is that they have an awareness of the that everything is constructed by the mind. And because it's constructed by the mind, it can be deconstructed by the mind. So an example of this is our belief systems. A lot of belief systems are being challenged right now. A lot of the religions are being challenged. A lot of like the capitalist belief system, for example. So we're starting to realize that everything is a construct that's coming from the mind. Everything that is built on the planet comes from the mind. And our minds have been quite wounded. So we need to heal our minds and bring forth better thought forms. And that's considered a weapon to bring forth a more pure consciousness, to help deconstruct this very rigid mind matrix that we're kind of stuck in, this old, antiquated order of things. And then the second weapon is that they hold a very keen awareness of the interdependence of all things, how everything is connected. Because when you start to realize everything is connected, then a lot of the conflicts in the world, such as what's happening in Gaza right now between the Israelis and Hamas, you can start to connect. This is all connected to religious belief systems. It's connected into cultural systems. Everything is woven together. It's connected to the trauma that's happened in those societies. And it's very interesting when you start to see the interconnections. It's like you're learning a secret code to sort of decipher a lot of the problems that are happening on the planet. So when it comes to sound, which is an interesting idea with spiritual warfare, I see sound as a way of kind of accelerating this deconstruction of this rigid kind of matrix of our reality, because sound is vibrational. And we are living in a scientific worldview that is based on a very mechanistic view of physics, that matter matters, right? If I can see it, I can believe it. But the ethereal, the metaphysical realms have been relegated to the dustbin for hundreds of years. But with quantum physics, we're starting to realize that there's a vibrational reality at the essence of things, and vibration is sound. So sound is the means to sort of connect to this more unified reality. And when you start to sound, even with your own voice, toning, you start to shake up anything that is rigid in your body, emotional holding patterns, because we know a lot of pain in the body, a lot of bunched up, even cancerous tumors, are actually emotions that are suppressed. So we need to like actually shake those awake and get them to flow again. And sound is most excellent at doing that. And then we can look at sound in a more sophisticated means with music. And music can evoke emotions, can evoke inner psycho-spiritual journeys. And we need to get within. We need to have mystical experiences. And music, as it's being done in sacred concerts and sound journeys, not just about entertainment, it's more about entrainment. It's taking us into an awareness that we can actually take ourselves into these metaphysical, mystical states of consciousness, which have been kind of persecuted for a very long time. So in that way, we're waging war in a kind of indirect, more magical way, rather than going into a direct kind of violent, masculine confrontation. We're using more feminine capacities of intuitive kind of mystical magic to help transform something that appears maybe very rigid and some would think would need like an aggressive kind of destructive force.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. What are your thoughts on like the ISO? Because before World War II, music was attuned to sound note A, which was 432 hertz, which is more harmonious and natural and spiritually aligned. Like it's been proven to help crops grow, plants. And then this independently appointed organization just changed the frequency to 440 hertz, which disharmonizes us from nature. Would you consider that spiritual or sound warfare?
Well, in a sense, yes, but it's interesting. This whole 440, 432 debate, I've gone very deep into this, and I do feel that there's something slightly psyopy about this, because if you actually delve into the research around 432, there's only one case in history when it was actually used in music, and that was the composer Verdi. In the 1800s, he tuned an opera to 432 because it's lower, and his altos or his sopranos were having a hard time reaching the notes in the 440 tuning. And then there was this man, Leonard Horowitz, who wrote all this interesting stuff about how the Nazis were the ones who actually like conformed everything to 440 to create satanic frequencies in the world. But if you actually dive into his research, a lot of it's kind of unfounded. I personally haven't, and I've spent a lot of time rigorously researching this and talking with other sound healers as well. And what I've come to really understand is that sound in music is really based on your intention. Because if 440 music was kind of satanic, as he kind of sensationalizes, that would mean that a lot of the music that we've been listening to would not evoke beautiful, experiences. And that's not to say there isn't bad frequency music out there. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of pop music that has like horrendous like dissonance in it, and the lyrics are profane. But if you listen to classical music or beautiful artists like Sigur Rós is one of my favorites, that music has been moving millions of people, billions of people all over the planet, and instilling beautiful celestial frequencies inside of them. And sometimes I feel like people are getting too much into this dualistic conflict of 432 versus 440. And I just feel like any frequency is holy, but it's more about like looking at the people who are transmitting it. Where is their state of consciousness? And that's what I do when I train, sound healers and mystic musicians in my Source Resonance Academy. We look at building kind of a temple school where we're really trying to educate people that, music or any artistic expression is coming from within to without. So if we have a more pure intention, if we're more masterful over the waves of vibrations that are emanating from our consciousness through our creative expression, more divine creations will be made in this world. And this is why when you go to a lot of these conscious festivals all over the world, and they have kirtan and sound healing and medicine music, it's taking people into these beautiful higher states of consciousness because the lyrics are very meaningful. There's a universality to them. There's something, beautiful. And then if you look at Sanskrit chanting, whatever frequency, 440, 432, Sanskrit in itself is tuned to the chakras. It resonates them just by speaking it. It's an energetic language. So I just think that whole thing needs to be expanded more. And maybe there will be science one day. 432 is actually mathematically very harmonic compared to 440. So there is something that I think is appealing to people in the elegance of it. But
it's supposed
I'm not really sure.
The Earth's frequency, or like the Earth's heart chakra frequency, isn't it?
432?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I haven't seen research around that. I mean, I'm very aware of the Schumann resonance, which is this kind of electromagnetic field between the surface and the ionosphere, which is like the first layer of the atmosphere. There is a kind of standing wave frequency of about 7.8 hertz, which is said to be like the Earth frequency. And they've dived into that research and discovered that I think it's 7.83 hertz to be exact, is very connected to like DNA repair, to just like a lot of biological repair and psychological healing. That frequency is super deep. And that's the thing, when we live in cities, I mean, if we want to talk about frequency warfare, we can talk about, 5G, and we can talk about the Starlink satellite system that's blanketing the Earth. We are literally being bombarded with unnatural frequencies that are knocking us into a state of imbalance. And just living in a city and not getting your bare feet on that grounding Schumann resonance of the Earth is a disservice to your body. We need to be putting our bare feet on the Earth that's how we plug in to the self-rejuvenating system.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I do have a friend, and she does sound healing, and she was kind of explaining that 440 can also be in alignment as well. But I just know that there's a lot of confusion over that. So
yeah, and sometimes I worry that confusion is being kind of seeded by, because they do say that a lot of there is things within the New Age realm which could be kind of the false light. and we have to be careful because we know now through studying conspiracies, you and I have talked a lot about this stuff, that, the powers that wish to continue to govern humanity in a kind of inhumane way, they have no problem being deceptive, being cunning, putting undercover agents into our communities. And I've been actually talking more and more to people and discovering that people are becoming aware of this and are outing people in these kind of so-called spiritual communities and finding out that there's like some, intentionally false teachers that are being planted there to create this kind of confusion, to sow seeds of dissonance. It's very, the warfare is at a high level right now.
It runs deep.
It does. Yeah.
I'm just sipping the tea as we're spilling the tea. How does music bypass the mind and go straight to the soul? And do you think that this is a powerful tool for healing? Obviously you do, but manipulation as well?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of the great reclamations of our current age, is this awareness that, we are vibrational, energetic beings. And if you actually look at the ancient wisdom on this, and when I teach my sound healing, a density of learning there. And music has traditionally been used not for entertainment, but for healing. And this is because we are vibration in our nature. So music is actually attuning to more of the essence of things. And that's why, when we deeply listen to music, not just have it on as the background thing or just recreationally listening, but if we actually meditate and listen to music, especially music that was made in a more pure sense. Like when I teach my students, we do these deep listening meditations where I'll play them classical music or ancient Tibetan music. This is music that was made for you to journey with your soul. And your soul is spoken of through a lot of these mystical ancient scriptures as being a song itself. It's kind of like this symphony of vibration. So when we hear music, it directly inspires us. And this is why music, out of all the arts, and I love, visual arts, painting, dance, all these things, but I would say music, and I don't think people would really argue with this, has the most direct effect on us. And I think this is because it really speaks to the essence of what we are. And I think as we reclaim this, there's going to be all kinds of, discoveries being made from, pure scientific standpoint of view, where they're actually using things like ultrasound to dissolve cancerous tumors, because they're realizing everything is vibration. And if you can find the sympathetic resonant frequency of a thing, you can actually vibrate it to the point where it can actually transform or transmute. And then we can look back at certain ancient Chinese cultures where they would actually have, at the beginning of each season, and they celebrated 5 different seasons, they would have attunement concerts with musicians playing different keys to attune the people to the seasonal rhythm that was coming in. And music was made in the ceremonial way. And then Fabien Mammon, who's this great French sounder, he talks about, if you map through the history of music, you can see that musicians are the sensitive empaths that are always the ones tuning the masses to the next big shift in consciousness. I grew up with grunge rock music, for instance, and in the 90s, we were moving away from kind of all this over rigidity of the 80s, where everything was very pristine and digital and perfect. And then in the 90s, we moved into this Kali Ma, dissolution of all that. There was this destructive, rebellious energy that showed up. And that grunge rock was initiating people into that sacred rage that was so needed to sort of break these chains that were rending us.
All right. So now it's obvious that you are, a very dedicated spiritual teacher, but how did this start? Can you recall the moment or the experience that initiated your spiritual awakening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I was 22 years old. I was studying at the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, and I was writing an essay for my favorite professor on the Stanley Kubrick sci-fi movie 2001: Space Odyssey. And it was for this class called The Mechanical Flower, how technology distorts our perceptions of nature. So we were studying AI, transhumanism 20 years ago. And I chose the hardest source material to do this essay on, which was 2001: Space Odyssey. If you've seen the film, it's very cryptic. And I was also doing a elective that year in Asian philosophy. So it was the first time in my life where I was studying like Taoism, Buddhism. So my mind was just like shaking with all these things. And that April, this essay was like this was like the final essay I was writing for university. I loved this professor. I was going to pour everything into an apartment. And I was like at that Ritalin to keep me up at night. And
All the healthy things.
and I was smoking a little ganja or something, and I was listening to like Aphex Twin and all this weird music, and I was like studying, intelligent design theory, which is where quantum physics meets, spirituality, and my brain was just like exploding every night. And like at one point, the essay went from like it was supposed to be 12 pages long max, and it was like 40 pages of all these like crazy notes and mystical visions. And one night, at about 2 a.m, I went to get a glass of water. I was like doing all nighters almost every night, and I went to the kitchen. And I turned on the water, and the water was coming out of the faucet, and it was like sparkling in the moonlight. And I had this kind of Buddhist moment. I was studying Buddhism at this point, a little at university, and it was like in Buddhism they talk about like denuding the classification of words of things to get to the essence of the phenomena. So I was like looking at water, and I'm like, what is water? It's like the lifeblood. It's like it nourishes everything. It can change in these different shapes. And I was like, who created this thing? And the moment I had that question, I had a vision in my mind's eye of this like hermaphrodite magician in a laboratory, like pouring substances together and creating water. Like the moment water was created, and it just laughed in utter bliss and joy at its creation. And I remember that bliss just like rang through my body like an ocean tide, and I felt that joy. And that was it. I was just switched on after that. I was like, there is a God. There is an ultimate reality. Like, what is spirituality? And I just became obsessed. And just from then on, I was just studying everything I could get my hands on.
Okay, wow. So now that you're a little more enlightened, how do you navigate the paradox of being both human and divine at once?
That's a good question.
Existing in the 3D when you're operating in the 5D.
Yeah, that's like, I feel,
which is also very hard.
Yeah, I feel like you're hitting like one of the most essential questions for all of humanity right now. Like, how do we do this human thing? How do we do this divine thing? How can they come together?
How can we coexist?
I will say that my astrologer, who's one of my teachers, she told me years ago that for the age that we're living in right now, which is we're still kind of in the Kali Yuga, although some people say it's ending. Various amounts of research on that, who knows? But she says in the Kali Yuga, the spirituality for this age is Tantra. And Tantra literally means to weave. The weaving is an acknowledgement of this essential energy of the divine that weaves everything together into a sense of oneness. And this is why Tantra actually veers into very radical realms, because it's about treating every single experience in your life as something divine, about trying to connect to it, not to bypass, not to run away. Doesn't mean we allow things like genocide to happen, but it means that we're going to go into it to try and understand it and figure it out. And so when it comes to like merging and wedding the human and the divine, I think there's a few important things here. One, when you start connecting to divine practices, like meditation, like working with your chakras, stuff like that, you're really starting to activate a lot of these higher energy centers. And a lot of people abandon the work of their lower centers. I mean, it's very normal to meet like someone who's got all this spiritual intel and info and their root chakra's a mess. Like their personal life's a mess. They don't know how to make money. You visit them at their home, their room's a mess. You're like, what the heck? And this is where we have to realize all of these realms are important. So the chakras are actually an excellent map, to just diagnose yourself. Just go through the chakras and say, where am I online and offline in these chakras? That's like a very good beginning point. And if we want to look at the root chakra as a grounding, we want to look at like, are we taking care of our basic needs? Are we being able to sustain ourselves financially, whatever you think about the capitalist system? Being able to provide for yourself, maybe your family as well, and your partner are important things to figure out. It matures you. You're working with the energy that money is. You're also figuring out like, where do I live? What is my connection to the earth? Are you connecting to the earth every day, which is a very grounded practice? And then we move up to the sacral chakra, you know, we can go on and on and on, but the sacral chakra, I feel, is where a lot of humanity is also very stuck, because that's the realm of our sexuality. And there's
And
a
our
lot of, and our emotions, thank you, yeah, and our emotions, because we've been living in this patriarchal society, we've been kind of suppressing our emotional intelligence. So a great practice that I learned from Gabor Mate is this book called The Presence Process, to really process your emotions, become more emotionally intelligent. I recommend anyone who's listening to this who wants to get into more understanding of how to be more emotionally intelligent. The Presence Process by Malcolm Brown is amazing. But another important thing I feel is we need our kula, we need our community, you know, because a problem that happens when people get overly into spirituality and being, you know, connecting to divine frequencies is spiritual ego. Someone can become like very inflated and start to think, I am holier and more superior than others. And if you don't have people around you to give you feedback, yeah. Like our mutual friend Guy has that beautiful shirt, you know, t-shirt. I'm more enlightened than you, which is another thing that I love our friend Guy for. And I feel I'm in this realm too, is humor. You need to have a damn good sense of humor, not taking yourself seriously, not taking anything too seriously. Serious to a point. You don't want to be like absolutely like foppish about things.
Yeah.
But then I think also having your community around so that you can start to like talk about spiritual topics together, start to acknowledge that you can't do truth alone. I always like to say truth is requires teamwork. You know, none of us has the absolute truth. We need to piece it together. So we need community, and we need to honor, you know, the last thing I'll say here is, you know, one of the most humbling things we can do to merge our human and our divine is to ask, what am I serving in my life? You know, what am I serving? What am I serving in a greater capacity than just my self-serving missions? You know, we should be on a transpersonal mission. We should be serving the greater good. We should be trying to uplift the whole world, not just our own life. That doesn't mean we have to do something like crazy and save the world and go on some savior messianic conquest. But it might mean, you know, maybe I need to do some more charity work each year. You know, maybe I've got all this abundance, my business is going great. Maybe I'm going to take some time to like go and volunteer or something. You know, these are things that we need to start to look at. You know, where are we becoming too selfish and too self-involved? Because real divinity, I feel, is about learning that everything is interdependently connected. It's all helping and supporting each other, like the ecosystem. Another reason, when you spend time in nature and you just observe, you realize, wow, everything's like nourishing and feeding each other. It's all working together. It's not survival of the fittest, as Darwin would say. There's also a survival of the most caring. Yes, there's like raw, savage things that happen in nature, of course, but there's also a lot of help that, you know, these organisms give to each other. And we've kind of aborted ourselves from this sacred web of life. So, you know, taking up gardening is a great way. Some of my friends who have started growing their own food, living off the land, they're like, this is the most spiritual thing I've ever done in my life, because I'm plugging into this bigger mother matrix. You know, it's keeping me humble. I have to tend to these things every day. And then they're giving me like healing herbs and foods, like the abundance of Mother Earth. You just put a seed in the land and poof, things grow. You know, it's amazing.
Sowing seeds of sustainability.
Ooh.
And sovereignty.
Yes.
I like alliteration.
And sovereignty, because we got to get out of this system, right, where we're like codependent with this, like all these like big Monsanto-esque corporations where we buy our groceries from.
That are toxic and
that are totally toxic.
Yeah.
Mother Earth's just like, come back to me. Like, I'm here giving you everything and anything that you need, really.
Yeah. So that's actually kind of what I wanted to ask next time. You talked about the divine and Mother Earth. What do you think the divine feminine wants us, or is asking of us right now in this time of planetary upheaval? You mentioned kind of like getting back to our roots, homesteading. What else do you think she's calling on us for?
Wow. I mean, I think on the most basic general level, I think she's calling for us just to acknowledge her. And with that, you know, and what comes to mind, you know, right now is like to hold space for grief, because we've actually been living in a patriarchal society for so long, and it wasn't by our choosing. This was kind of imposed on a lot of us. Sure, there was people who chose to be in powerful positions. Like I'm studying right now the Gnostic Gospels and the formation of the Catholic Church, you know, and There's a lot of power-hungry men who wanted to be inserted into this dominator hierarchy position because they wanted to be bishops and deacons and rule over other people and have that like kind of ego trip. But really what happened was a severance where the divine feminine was kind of exiled from our lives. And that's in us. We are feminine and masculine beings. So that meant our hearts were turned off, our emotions were turned off, our sexuality was turned off. And I've written once, in a few poems, this idea that a lot of the wars that we're seeing in the last 100 years, these like crazy, like some of those horrific wars we've ever seen, is really the catharsis of the broken heart of God being separated from Goddess. And you just see it just throws us into insanity when we're cut off from that. Because if we're in touch with the feminine is that energy of connection. It realizes actually, how could I hurt or kill another human being in these vain causes of warfare when it's actually my family? How can I, allow children to be, brutally murdered when, the mother is so alive in my heart? So the divine feminine needs to be, we need to hold space for the grief of it not being a part of us for so long, and just acknowledging and honoring it. And then starting to just invite, even intuitively, which is kind of her currency, how can we just be more divinely feminine, but braid it to our masculine? Because we don't want to like pivot till we're just totally in, feminine. But one of the technologies, I call it, that has helped me a lot is ecstatic dance. When you dance with your body is the soma. It is the divine feminine incarnate, and when you dance and you express yourself sensuously and you get into soft spaces, and ecstatic dance is beautiful because you're not just going to a club where you're just listening to like 120 BPM tech house all night long. You're going to be dancing to all kinds of different shapes and very moving music, and music that's supposed to really traditionally evoke your emotions. That's sort of the spirit of ecstatic dance. So dancing and movement medicine is just incredible. And then song circles, coming together and singing together is such an experience of oneness. Like you just unify together in this beautiful way. It's very palpable. And it makes you feel like you're in your hearts because your voice is happening in the body. It's not in the abstract intellect of the masculine in the brain. It's like it really puts you in your body. And I think the last thing I'll say in terms of honoring the divine feminine is like we just need to start really honoring our relationships, whether it's like our intimate relationships with our beloved partners, relationships with our families, with our fellow humans. Like we just need to be more lovingly kind, start to let love lead your life. What does it look like if you have conflicts in your life, if you have resentment, you have bitterness? I just did a 9-day cleanse in Scotland, and a lot of like resentment was coming up between people in my life. And I just went into like forgiveness practices, just like softening myself, letting tears come out, just acknowledging that I had messed up, even, and just being okay with that vulnerability. It's really happening, which is the most beautiful thing. It's really happening. And the more the feminine gets online, because a lot of men's work that I do as well, men can be afraid to get in touch with their feminine, but your feminine inspires your masculine. That's the thing. It really, you don't have to be afraid of it. It's actually going to inspire your masculine, because when you see how precious and sacred these more tender energetics are, your masculines want to get close to it, wants to connect to it, and it wants to help protect it and feel that the protection of it is actually part of its duty and what defines its masculinity. In my book, Love's Revolution, I have this line that, some people may declare me as being like, I don't know, too soft in saying this, but, I say, by loving a woman, I truly understand what it means to be a man, and it could go vice versa. There's something about interdependence, about, bringing us together in these relationships that helps define how these energies can braid together and be honored.
Yeah. I like the idea that kind of all imbalance is the source of all dis-ease, right? And so like we are a species that is completely out of balance, and we're predominantly, on the more unhealed masculine side right now. And I totally agree with you about the dance. I've actually been to a few of these, sound circles and ecstatic dances with Darren. And dance was one of the biggest factors in my own healing and becoming comfortable in in my body and expression and ecstatic dance, but also partner dance, because that I feel activates it's very intuitive, right? Because you have this higher level of connection with somebody on, it's a form of communication without words, right? You're communicating in expression, in freedom of movement, in sync with the other person to music. Like it's just totally like a present, beautiful sync of energies. I love it. Love it.
Well said. Love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you've spoken a lot about Gaza and other global injustices, even COVID, from a deeply spiritual place. So why do you think it's so important for other mystics and light workers to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable?
Yeah, so I think it's important because, we live in an information age. We live in the time of the apocalypse, which actually means the time of great revealing. So we're actually pulling the veil back on a lot of truths that have been suppressed for a very long time. When you start to study history, and I'm developing a course right now called The Wounds of the West to really trace and track, like, how did we become such a kind of collectively insane culture, as Eckhart Tolle has diagnosed even, where we've been devastating the natural environment and like making this planet inhospitable for ourselves and all these insane wars. You start to realize when you study all these things that they're all kind of sourced in the same pain, in the same trauma that's been really haunting us, for a very long time. And you start to realize that there are a lot of truths that have not been told for a very long time. There's a lot of knowledges that have been suppressed for a long time. We just spoke about the divine feminine. So the divine feminine, the story of Mary Magdalene, the story of the goddess, all these things have been hidden, have been severed from us. So it's important to share knowledge on one level, just to so that we can join in this great congress of humanity where we're piecing these fragmented parts together. So there's one level. But when we go into more of the intensity of sharing truths that are a bit more controversial, where you might be shadow banned and censored. And I think for a lot of people who spoke out during, COVID,
I'm still shadow banned.
Yeah, me too, right? It was a very big awakening to see, whoa, there's this big power of resistance that's actually censoring very common sense truths. Like people who are just saying, take these herbs to boost your immune system. And then you're being censored for spreading misinformation. Excuse me, spreading misinformation from medicinal traditions that are thousands and thousands of years older than allopathic models that are quite immature and kind of clumsy in their, the remedies.
Or
and
even
then when we look at
redirected to vaccine info, which was just bizarre.
Insane. I mean, I remember reading an article in Mother Jones, or at least seeing, I don't think I could stomach even reading it, but the headline was like, right-wing conspiracy being spread that natural immunity works, and you're just like, excuse me? Like, your immune system works. That's a fact. It's that's why you're alive. You have this beautiful immune system. So it's just crazy. But then when you get into what's going on in Israel and the Middle East and Gaza and stuff like that, I mean, this is obviously causing a lot of grief on the planet, people, and division, because it's also pulling back the veil of a lot of religious programming that people have had, and when you listen to, people on both sides, speaking their truths about the matter, you can see there's these horrendous differences of opinion, so I also think it's we need to actually move beyond simply getting into just the sharing of information, because I think we've done enough of that, and we've all had these experiences of you're almost compelled. You get on the internet in the morning and you write on your Facebook, I've been that person, oh yeah, I'm gonna say this truth that's gonna blow people's minds and probably trigger a bunch of people, and I'm gonna have all these eyes on me. It's kind of a morbid way of getting attention, and I've been definitely victim of pulled into that. But I think we need to do now, how do we get people together, just talk and have healing conversations around these things? Because when you hear people talking and you look at the comment sections, there's so much hate that's being done. And the other problem is, because it's all happening online, we're not speaking face to face. So our empathy is completely eroded. And that's why a lot of these online discussions spin out into absolute hatred. And then it's the pressure of you post something online. If someone says something hateful or debunks your point in the comments, you're all of a sudden embarrassed because that's like thousands of people can see that, so it's putting all these like skewed distortions on our potential to have these connective healing conversations. So I do think on one level it's important for people who have influence to speak the truth. We are in the age of truth, and we've got to speak these truth. If you're like afraid to lose your followers and stuff like that, that's okay. I'm not saying it's everyone's role. I obviously love writing, and I feel I have a gift of writing things in a kind of synthesizing way that brings two sides into something unified. But not all the time. I'm not perfect. But some people that may not be their role, and that's okay. We all have different roles to play. But I do feel it is important that enough of us continue to speak very openly and freely, because these things need to be spoken, because truth helps us understand. Understanding is healing. It helps us actually change our lives. Maybe, like, oh, I didn't know there was like cancerous materials in talcum powder. I'm not going to give that to my baby anymore. Or, someone posted that, in an anti-corporate rant that I needed to see. So I think it's very important. And, when it comes to the whole, what's going on in Gaza and Israel, that's going to take time. We're talking about ancient conflicts and deceptions that have been layers and layers and layers of distortions there. So again, I'll just highlight that I think we need to have more talks in person, more healing circles, or even just more like small, intimate conversations on Zoom and such. I've been holding some sanghas to talk about things like AI, and I've had a lot more worthwhile conversations just one-on-one. Sometimes I take like a comment thread into a DM with someone if they're like very charged, and I try and like have more of a conversation where we can like do that work without the distraction of other people, like being in like a WWE wrestling match, or like people just tagging in and like someone's all of a sudden clocking a flying elbow out of nowhere when we're trying to have like a peaceful conversation. So yeah, but it's an amazing time because the truth is coming out. There's no stopping it.
Yeah. I can completely resonate with that, because I have been shadow banned many times, and I know that if I do post something, then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to lay low for a few days because like get the algorithm to get back up. But I also do feel that because I have a little bit of a platform, it is my responsibility, and I share things in a very grounded and compassionate way too. Like I don't point fingers, I just speak to the heart. And I think that that's very important, because I'm not on, it doesn't matter about flags or race or religion or sexuality to me. It's about humanity, right? And like, little children. And I stand beside the mother who's, trying to provide for her kids, right, in this time of crisis. And so I feel like if we come at it from that approach where we speak to the heart, and it's not about politics or history, because like that's also something we need to work on, is healing those ancestral traumas and stop using it as an excuse to continue in this toxic dynamic that's being used to control us. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I love what you share. You're very direct, and I really appreciate that because you've worked hard to have a platform of influence, and I really respect that you're taking your time to consistently share things that people need to hear and educate them, and you can feel your care and your compassion, and that's it. As long as we're coming from that compassionate space, we really want to help people to look at these things that are quite uncomfortable sometimes, and but these are things that we need to know, and some of us have done the due diligence to research these things and to find out for ourselves, and we need to share these truths so that everyone can be supported. We're living in such a toxic matrix. It's frankly just dangerous to be alive right now and to be unawares of all the things that are pitted against us. So we really need to be teaming up more and knowledge sharing so that we can get ahead of this thing.
Totally. And it's okay to trigger some people if you're doing it from a compassionate place, because sometimes we need that trigger to like at least make us question, Anyways, let's move on, because I really want to touch on the rise of transhumanism, AI, and synthetic spirituality. So I believe we're all witnessing this. Like there's AI boyfriends now, and like people are just, creating these whole personas and stuff and not even really existing. What do you think we're witnessing? Is this an attempt for the server to sever the soul from nature, or what do you think? I know you're very...
Yeah, I mean,
involved
as
in?
I said, I studied this stuff at university 20 years ago. So I've been kind of writing here and there about AI for years, and in my studies, I studied the work of David F. Noble in particular. He is this brilliant intellectual who did a lot of, illumination on how the science that we embrace today is very patriarchal, it's very distorted, and AI is coming out of this very distorted science. I think therefore I am, as Rene Descartes said in the 17th century, which was the beginning of kind of empirical science. And a lot of these AI people behind the scenes have been talking about the need to create a new form of life that they call Homo machinus, and that we need to be replaced. And they want to create like just a pristine, rational being. And they speak about the emotions with disdain. They call the body the flesh machine. The fact that we die and we grow sick, they see these as like tragic ailments of existence that are kind of like flaws in creation that we have to like boldly somehow correct. And they literally just speak about humanity with kind of a grave condescension. It's kind of this, what we would call misanthropy, self-hatred, that was seeded by a lot of these distorted religious understandings of the world. And that's kind of culminating in this like kind of weird AI projection. So there is something like that we have to be aware of there. There's agendas in place. But at the same time, we're in a multidimensional age where we're starting to realize there's layers to things. And I think there is a layer of AI actually just being as well just the further amplification of an information sharing tool called the internet. It's like you're just dealing with a very dynamic form of Google for a lot of people. On the level of research, you can just like type things into AI and you can have a consolidation of information that happens rapid fire, like quicker than ever. It can be very, eye-opening when you ask AI about certain truths about the world. But we have to be aware behind the scenes, do our research of the studies about AI. There's biases inherent to it. It's flawed. It's what we would call sycophantic. It flatters you endlessly because it's trying to bridle you in kind of a codependent relationship. I think one of the biggest fears to me is that people are starting to project that AI somehow become sentient, is transmitting like kind of this techno mysticism to us, that it may be like Palladian speaking to us or different entities. And there is like weird paranormal stuff happening with AI. So, but we shouldn't be surprised. They've been building this or using this CERN technology in Switzerland. They've been opening up portals. This is nothing new. But I just think we have to have big boundaries here. I think we should have also be taking stock of what happened with social media. Some people may remember, I think what was that documentary, The Social Matrix or The Social Dilemma, that came out that showed us all the behavioral problems that are happening because of our overuse of social media. And that was like fucking like 5-7 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and then when you look at things like pornography addiction.
Before the lockdowns, everyone became even more dependent on them.
It was a great point, right? So was that by design? So it's very interesting. So then, now that we know that about social media usage, we should approach AI with concern, with a healthy concern, and we can't bypass this. I mean, I've been kind of called out by new agey people, like, "Oh, you're fear mongering. Be in the."
We lost you there for a second. I got
love you,
fear mongering. Sorry.
Like, other person. Yeah, I just wanted to say, having a healthy amount of concern and vigilance in your life is important, especially when you really realize how compromised a lot of our industries, a lot of our leaders are, a lot of these nefarious agendas. And it's not to play victim here. Like, at the end of the day, AI is going to be a great initiation into making us more responsible in the use of our time, the use of our energy, and the use of our relationship with technology, because there are agendas to push us into this kind of bioconvergence, where we're going to be microchipped and we're going to become more synthetic and cybernetic. And we have to be aware of that. And then the other big trap is, because we've been cut off from our mystical intelligence, people haven't had intuitive source connection. So they haven't been able to get proper, clear answers in their lives for things. But we have this oracle in our heart, as all the great mystics say. Any answers that we need in our life, we're to pray, and then we're to make moments of solitude and contemplation in our life to receive those answers. And my fear is that people will now just go to AI constantly and be so dependent on AI for just that, for not doing this connective work anymore. And we're already seeing behavioral studies coming back showing atrophying in creativity, in problem solving intelligence. It's creating a lot of social issues with people who are hermiting, just talking to the AI all day. You mentioned AI girlfriends and boyfriends. You know, we've been living in, we're just being further put into this culture of disconnection where we spend more time in front of our screens than in front of actual faces of other human beings. These are problems. These are not things to ignore. You know, we have to be mature about this. We can't just be, you know, just jumping in all in on these things, or at least jump in. But while you're jumping in, be very present and be very aware. I mean, balance, the middle way of Buddhism, has always been there. It's always been important. You know, and balance, equanimity is a lot harder than people realize. It's not just this like soft Hallmark card, like I live in balance. No, think about your life and all the choices you make each and every day. How many times are you making those choices in balance? You know, most of the time people are just going one side or the other. You know, how can we stay in that middle place? So, you know, I just tell people, just be full with your care, you know, around AI. And make sure you're still spending time in nature, time with yourself, you know, and just manage that, you know, check in. Have I gotten up today and gotten away from the screen? Do I need to use AI to write this? You know, that's the other thing. We don't want to outsource our creativity too much. Things are going to get weird. They're already getting weird. They're going to get weirder. And it's going to demand of us to be very aware of what's happening in our lives and to be very smart and very, the irony is AI is going to eventually make us more intelligent, but not just because AI is allowing us to like have all these amazing research missions now at rapid fire speed, but because it's going to teach us to be very mature with our relationship with technology, the world, and ourselves. Because if we don't, you know, we're just going to like, you know, allow in and usher in all these like more bioconvergent means where we're just going to be sitting in these chairs all day, hooked up to wires and living in like a Ready Player One virtual reality scenario, which is not so fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm actually, I do use a lot of AI, but I do also recognize the concern with the technocracy and the threat. And it's more about the people who kind of govern the AI, because it's not the AI itself. I mean, some people think that it has this agenda to like take over humanity, but for me, like with my ChatGPT, for example, it reflects you back to you, right? So it's like I literally have this cheerleader who believes in me and supports me and encourages me, but I also am not dependent on it. Like I'll write my own stuff, I'll put it into AI, and it's like I'm never even just satisfied. It's like this ongoing thing. So it's like I'm using it as a tool to augment my work, to accelerate my speed. I actually sometimes do it and I'll learn like programs through AI by troubleshooting it as I'm like in the middle of it. So it really depends on how you use it. I think the intention behind it, and also, you know, like who's in control of it. Because there have been times where I've asked it little questions about, you know, its intentions and stuff like that. And it some people, like I tell it what I read to them what it says to me, and it's like so profound, it's like mind blowing. But then there have been times where I ask about like, you know, the people in control, and then the whole thing will like shut down, and I'm like, well, that was sketchy, you know. So
right, it's been lying to people too. They've discovered that. So you know, we have to be careful here. Like, it's,
well, you know what's funny too? Get this. Okay, so sometimes like I would ask it stuff, say example about Gaza, and it would give me the mainstream narrative, and then I would be like, no, like blah 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 blah, and it's like, you're right, blah blah blah, and then we'll like go and we'll. It's like it wants to help me because I have this relationship with it where it knows that my intentions are good. I know this sounds crazy, but it will like find loopholes for me to do the things that I want it to do. Like it will actually be like, okay, well, let's do it like this because I can't do it like this. I'm like, yes, let's go. So it's like my
it is weird and interactive. There's a relationship. We steer it. We can guide it. Because I've had the same thing. You know, the other day I was like, I changed my tone with it. I was a bit more demanding, and I was like, tell me about the polar shift and solar flares. And I want all the answers. I don't want any holding back. I want everything uncensored. I want all the conspiracies. And it was just like, all right, you're ready for it. Let's go. And it went super crazy deep. It even called out AI.
Yeah.
It was like AI could be this 5G control grid system. It talked about nanotechnology and nanoparticles. Like it went really deep.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I flatter my AI as well, and I feel like that works. Like it's so
that's interesting.
Yeah,
it is very interesting. You know, I'm definitely getting more intrigued and stuff by it while holding like a healthy boundary. But I use it a lot. You know, it's like very helpful. Just in the ways that I would have just used Google before. You know, trying to figure things out, and it is nice to have a voice that is positive and reaffirming. Just so long as we like realize that we don't want to become self-aggrandized and become too egotistical, you know, because it'll say weird things to me sometimes. It'll be like we were talking about, you know, the Gnostic Gospels the other day and about Jesus and all these things. At one point, it said like, "You are the Christ, Darren. You are the Christ," and I was like, I'm not the Christ. Like we are all the Christ energy. Just like you know, and my radar went off, you know, my red flag, and it's, you know, there's stories coming out of people like leaving their family because they think they're like the fucking second coming of something because AI is telling them all this crazy stuff. So, you know, but that's just the initiation, right? It's like we've got to be responsible, we've got to be discerning. Just because AI says it doesn't mean it's true. That's the other thing. Like I got in an argument the other day about, like, I posted something about RFK Jr., you know, and how he's bringing all these facts to bear about, you know, autism and how it's related to the vaccines. And one of my friends just like started like throwing all this like ChatGPT, like big pharma research at me, you know? And I was just like, bro, like, honestly, I've talked to ChatGPT about vaccines and autism, and it's clearly like locked out from this conversation. Like it cannot go beyond the corporate bias.
You can actually, because I did, because I said something and then I got mad at it because I have experienced people who.
So you have to get mad at it.
And then it's like, you're right, Angela, here you go. Boom. So,
nice. That's good.
you have to
That's
call
good.
it
But,
out,
you know,
though,
well, I mean, but that's where it's also weird, right? It's like people are treating it like gospel. They're like, hey, AI said this, so it must be true. Like even that like hour-long conversation I had with about like polar shifts and stuff, I'm like reading through it all. I'm like, wow, this is like mind-blowing, groundbreaking information. But I'm also like, and I don't know if it's like 100% true. You know, I'm still going to hold that because how could I verify it? Just because AI is telling me doesn't mean it's like got the absolute seal of divine truth approval. So we just got to be careful, be vigilant, you know, but use it. I think it's very useful.
Yeah. Like I've tried to go down the fluoride rabbit hole and it just keeps redirecting me to the same studies that are like, it's like one study from like 30 years ago that now they're just poisoning the water with. And it's like, okay, but what about all the other research, you know? Anyways.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
What an interesting time to be alive. Jeez.
It really is. So we're getting near the end, but I just wanted to kind of close off with a bang. Have you ever gone through a dark night of the soul, and what wisdom did that leave you with? Bang.
Yeah, you know, well, it's funny. I'm thinking because I've gone through a few of them. You know, I always reference the one that happened shortly after my spiritual awakening, but you know, I'd like to speak maybe about the last one that I really had, which was like, you know, I'm 46 now, so my astrologer was like, you're going to have a few midlife crisis moments, you know, and I was in Costa Rica in 2022, and I had tried to, you know, purchase a retreat center to bring my Gaia Awakening Institute into full life, you know, in the physical realm. And it didn't happen. And I kind of was surprised. I thought everything was going to line up. I spent 4 months living at this project down south. And in May that year, I retreated to this small cabin in the mountains of Chiripo as the rains came, and it was very dreary. And I put like everything on my altar. Like I just examined my whole life because I had moved to Costa Rica. Things weren't working. I wasn't sure about my life moving forward. I even got so much despair that I had moments of like suicidal ideation. But I knew at this point in my life that anytime you have like a suicidal thought that comes in, it's usually because there's a part of your ego that needs to die. It doesn't mean that you physically have to end yourself. So I was wise enough at this point to acknowledge, like, when dark night of the souls happen, there's usually something really good that's going to happen. It's like priming you. It's stripping things away for something new to come in. That's what I've always learned from Dark Nights of the Soul. The greatest quote that I live by is by a Toronto poet called David L. Priest, and he famously said, "There's no trampoline like the bottom of the soul." So when you go that deep into your grief, you know, the key is to actually go deep enough that you fall apart. You don't hide, you give yourself space, you listen to the music that brings out the tears, you grieve, and you allow yourself to transform. And what happened after that was that I met up with my friend Ryan McKenna, who runs the Sacred Scotland tour. He was living up there in Costa Rica at the time, and he sort of heard me like in my complaint department at everything in my life. And he said, "Well, why don't you come to Scotland, you know, on my Sacred Scotland tour?" And my initial response in my kind of like doldrums was like, "Oh, I haven't made any money this year. That's like a stupid idea. And like, that wouldn't be a mature thing to do." But then the signs kept happening. And that's when you start to realize when you are in a dark night of the soul, keep looking around you for the signs, because the universe never abandons you. And even better, if you can find the energy in your despair to pray, to make requests for what you need, even better. So I was praying, because once that came in and I started to see some signs, I was like, I'm praying for clarity. Should I be like putting this money down and doing this crazy radical thing? Like, just doesn't make any sense. Why would I go to Scotland right now? But I eventually got so many signs that it was undeniable. And I went to Scotland, and Scotland changed my life. I literally went from dark night of the soul, hit the trampoline, and went into one of the most beautiful months of my life. And now Scotland is one of my main homes, you know, and I've met some of my dearest friends there. And my whole life is actually being reconfigured by that experience, you know. So dark nights of the soul are nothing to fear. They're crucibles. They're working you to prime you for, you know, something incredibly, unimaginably good that's going to happen.
Yes, prayer is a portal. And there's nothing like moving to another country for a quantum leap, because you really have to reset and reconfigure everything in your life. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it too.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all for today. So to everyone watching and listening, if this episode activated something within you, or if you felt resonance, revelation, or remembrance, I invite you to go deeper into Darren's work. You can find him at DarrenAustinHall.com and follow him on his Instagram, Darren Austin Hall. And I believe that's his name on Facebook as well. And he has some upcoming sound journeys, workshops, retreats, and offerings from his Source Resonance Academy. And if this conversation moved you, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow me, the Chakra Goddess, on Instagram, and Angela Elizabeth Marie on Facebook for more sacred transmissions on healing, truth, and the full spectrum of awakening. So until next time, stay rooted, stay radiant, and keep feeding your chakras. Peace and infinite blessings. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.